Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy folks, and we are back. Sorry if that clap was a bit loud. I'm excited. It is now November, one more month till Crimbo, but I won't start talking about Christmas yet because unlike the shops in the UK, I don't come early. And that is not a euphemism. Oh my God. I'm just going to move on. Anyway, sorry, I've flustered myself now. See, if you're feeling embarrassed, think how I feel right now. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're good. As you can tell, I'm in good spirits. Not just because it's November, it's a new month. That means new topics and new things to talk about. But it also means that I get to go back to a topic in series that I haven't done in a very, very long time. I think the last one I did was back in September, and it was for the Chronicles of Riddick, those games there. Which, if you remember, if you have seen it, which you haven't, please do go back and check it out. It's a very, very good episode. And actually, surprisingly, as some of you guys might know, I have a YouTube channel now, and I'm currently at like 47 subscribers. But funnily enough, my Chronicles of Riddick episode, it's got about, on my Anchor, according to Anchor, and all the other platforms that my podcast is on, only 3 people, including myself, from doing edits, have listened to the episode, which is a bit of a bummer, but it's okay, we move on. Then I uploaded it to my YouTube, and funnily enough, and it makes me giggle because I really didn't expect it, but I'm on my computer at the moment, right? And the Chronicles of Riddick episode has, in total, 13 views, right? Which is crazy, considering that only 3 people, including myself, so that's 2 people, listen to it. It's blown up on YouTube, and I think that's just amazing. Surprisingly as well, my Buzz Lightyear episode that I did, where I watched the movie that they did on Disney Plus, that got about 6 or 7 downloads in total, and then on my YouTube, it's currently standing at 31 views, my most popular video that I've posted. So, dreams do come true, as Disney say. But I just wanted to update you guys on that because, again, it's just something that made me smile. But anyway, coming back to it, the last episode that I did about Chronicles of Riddick. That was the last movie tie-in game that I did. So now I've finally got a chance to come back and play. It took a while to complete this game, and I will explain as to why when I get into the actual review. But I finally managed to get round to playing and completing Meet the Robinsons by Disney Pictures, the video game on Xbox 360. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, before I get into it, anybody who's new here, who's a new listener, or who hasn't listened to this series for a very, very long time, or didn't listen to the Chronicles of Riddick episode, basically, every now and then I go back and I look at games from my childhood, games that I didn't play, mostly movie tie-in games that based off movies, TV shows, that sort of thing. I've reviewed a few in the past. I did Wall-E, I did Kung Fu Panda, I did the Chronicles of Riddick. I feel like there was another one, but I can't remember. I think that's it. So far, I haven't done a lot, but I quite enjoy doing this series because it's a lot of fun to go back and play the games that I missed out when I was a child that I wanted to play, that I only played the demos of. Because growing up with the Xbox 360, you had demo discs. You'd go out, you buy the magazines, and it'd be a disc. You don't really get that nowadays, but you get the disc and you take it home and you read the magazine and you put the disc in and you play all the demos on there and you get the new sort of game of pictures you can get on there, and you get all, as they later started doing, especially with Xbox, the more demo discs you bought of the magazines, the more points you earned, and that each time you played a new disc, you could use those points to unlock bonus features like commentary and stuff like that on new games. And it's really, really quite interesting. They don't really do it no more, but it's a bit of nostalgia and I love it. The reason I started doing this sort of series is because I basically saw that a lot of people were doing movie reviews, a lot of people were doing video game reviews, and I figured, what, I'll be different. I'll put them together and I'll do movie video games and TV sort of video game reviews. And it's so it's done quite well. So As I mentioned, I did Kung Fu Panda. That was a really fun one. Go back and check that out. I did Wall-E. That was fun, even though it was a bit of a ball ache. But I still love Wall-E. It hasn't tarnished my love of that franchise yet. I did Chronicles of Riddick. That was more grown up, less childish, more sort of serious. Still wasn't that fantastic of a game, but it is what it is. And now I'm doing Meet the Robinsons, and I'm really, really excited because I love this film. This is one of my favourite Disney movies. But before I get into it, two things I've got to do. First of all, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod to check out all my stuff, all the games that I'm playing, all the movies I'm watching, all the topics that I'm going to be talking about. You know how it is by now. Just follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod and listen to all the things I've got to do. Second bit of stuff is business, and business is good. And even though we're in November, it's the same business as always, but this is a good business, and I love to do this business. How many times can I say the word business without getting tongue-tied? Let's see. So if you're new or you're an old listener, Nerdstalgic, that's me, Luke. World of Books have decided to, well, there is a word, and I've lost it. That's it. Sponsor this episode and sponsor the show by giving me a code to give to you guys that you can use at checkout to get you 10% off. That code is Nerdy10, NERDY 10, all higher case. Use that at checkout and you get yourself 10% off anything and everything that you order from them, from books, vinyls, DVDs, video games, old and new, all been saved from charity shops and landfills and stuff like that, all pre-owned, but all loved, all looked after, all cared for. So go on their website, www.worldofbooks.com, or search it on Google. Give them a follow on Twitter. Give them a follow on Instagram. You know how it works by now. They're on TikTok as well. If you're on there, give them a follow on there and let you know that Luke from the Nerdstalgic podcast sent you. So thanks again to World of Books for sponsoring the show. Make sure to use the promo code Nerdy10 to save yourself 10% off. And that is it. So on to the fun, juicy stuff, shall we? So, as I mentioned, I am a huge lover of the movie Meet the Robinsons. I absolutely adore this movie for many, many reasons. Not just that it's quite charming, it's quite beautiful, and the message is very, very wonderful, but it calls to me in a way that I've mentioned before in the past, and I'm going to mention it again for anybody who is new. If you're a regular listener, you've heard this story before, so I do apologize, but growing up, there was many things that I wanted to do and I wanted to be in my life. I wanted to be an adventurer. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a published writer. I wanted to be like Bear Grylls, and there's many things that I wanted to do. Even at one stage, I wanted to be a fish. Don't know why. Just wanted to be in the ocean and swim around in the sea. We all have these small sort of things that we want to do and be when we're younger, and sometimes we grow out of them and realize that it's not possible. Others that we stick with them, like wanting to be a writer. Like sadly, we can't be a fish. We'd all like to be a fish. That's Help I'm a Fish. That's an old-fashioned movie. I say old-fashioned. It's from like my time, the late 90s, early 2000s. Fantastic movie, and I hope to review it one day. But that's where the fish thing comes from, just in case you're wondering. But there are a lot of dreams that we keep that we strive to, and sometimes we achieve them, or sometimes we don't. Sometimes we do become astronauts, and sometimes we do become explorers, or we do become archaeologists, or we do become the Alan Grant of the paleontology sort of world. You know what I mean? So sometimes we get these dreams that we get to succeed in. Sometimes we get a dream that we don't. One of the big dreams that I had growing up is that I wanted to be an inventor. I love the idea of inventing things, of inventions and scientists and geniuses, and Leonardo da Vinci was an absolute idol of mine. I loved the idea that this guy who lived in Renaissance Spain was able to come up with such visually modern inventions. Like, he invented the tank, he invented the plane, he invented the parachute. He invented so much things, and then he's a fantastic artist at the same time. And my young brain just couldn't cope that this guy managed to do all this in a time where it's meant to be the Dark Ages. It's meant to be a time of, all that kind of stuff is shunned because of the church and all that. I won't get into it because that's like a history lesson, and we're not here for history. But the point is, the idea of that fascinated me, and it was movies like Meet the Robinsons. It was movies like Robots, and movies like Cloud with a Chance of Meatballs and stuff like that. There are other movies as well, but those ones off the top of my head where it was like the idea of being an inventor, of just inventing things, of putting pen to paper, thinking of what the world needs, writing it down, inventing it, and then building it, and then changing the world for good. That idea always made me smile. And one thing I loved about this movie was the fact of it sort of convinced me that it could be done. It is possible. The whole idea of keep moving forward. Of if you have a dream, if you have a sort of goal, you can achieve it. It's just you just have to keep moving forward. You hit one hurdle, don't stop, keep moving forward. If you get a design but it's already been invented, don't worry about it. Keep moving forward. The next idea is waiting for you around the corner. You know what I mean? And it's not just in inventing; it's in life as well. If something really horrible happens in your life, or something, or if something happens where like you get fired, or um or mental health or something like that, it's always a fact of keep moving forward. Just keep going, never stop, because as soon as you stop, that's when everything stops. The dreams, the aspirations, they all stop. So if you keep moving forwards, even if you never achieve them, you keep going, because life will move on anyway. So why don't you keep moving on with it? It's a very poignant, very sort of deep sort of message. And I got a little notebook and I started writing down designs and ideas. And I don't know where that notebook is, but I remember that I had an idea which is kind of like, I still say to this day that I invented it, that I came up with it, but uh, I'm a small fish in a big pond, and Elon Musk has loads of money. Um, Basically, the whole idea of the hyperlink sort of train. I had an idea that we could run tubes under the ocean, and that on either side of the ocean, we'd have a sealed vacuum, so that there was no friction, and that we'd have huge, powerful fans on both sides of this tunnel, and that it would have a capsule in the inside, and that it would be sucked. Say, for instance, if you get on this tube in London, and the tube ends, I say, in, say, like Norway, for example, that the big fan in Norway, because there's no sort of because it's like a sealed pressure capsule, there's no air resistance. I think it's just like you could just float through it, and there's no resistance to air, so there's nothing having to slow you down, there's no drag, so it's just seamless. That if you turned the turbines on one end, that it would create a vacuum that would then suck the capsule of people through the tube, and then it would take you to the other side of Norway, and it would be a quick way of doing that. That was the idea, and I even designed the capsule, how the capsule would look, and the idea of how the turbines would work. I know it sounds quite silly, but I was quite, as a young age, like I was in single digits. I wasn't 10 or 12. Like I was in single digits. I was like about 8. I think when this came out, I think I was about 8 or 7 or 8 years old. I was quite young, but I just like the idea of using tubes and stuff like that. Sadly, again, small fish, big pond. I have got no money. I've got no sort of education or anything like that at the time. So it was a fact of there was no way of me getting my idea out, getting it heard, and getting it sort of funded and built. And so years and years later go by. People like Elon Musk and that come up, and then you've got the hyperlink, and then you've got them using tubes and sort of magnets and wind and turbines and stuff like that. So I don't want to sound like they copied me or anything like that, or it's a fact of jealousy, or espionage or anything like that. But it's just the common idea of that, this idea that we all share ideas, that there is a cosmic sort of entity where that we all sort of take, like somewhere in the universe, somewhere in space, there's just like a bubble of just a cloud, or whatever you want to call it, of just thoughts and ideas from around the universe, and that all different species and people can tap into it, and that humans have been tapping into this whenever we dream and all that. I won't get into it fully, but it's the idea of a shared consciousness, that ideas are not a single person's, that we all share ideas. It just, some people have the means of finding the ideas, interpreting them, and then using them to affect themselves or the world, or whatever. Um, so yeah, I took myself as a little inventor. I saw myself as a little Lewis, that I wanted to change the world and that I wanted to invent things, and that's where my love of this movie comes from. And then you go from that, and you have the fun characters. You've got the frogs that can sing. You've got the Doris, and you've got little Doris, and you put some on a T-Rex. And yeah, Bolhap guy makes it, well, Goob chases Lewis, and the T-Rex can't get him, can't eat the boy. And then he's like, I got small arms and I can't get the boy, and I don't think this plan was very, very well thought through. And it's like, and he said, pause it, master. I love it. It's silly, but it's charming. It's lovely. It's got a very poignant sort of message. So I just love this movie, and all the characters are great, and it was just one of those sort of cornerstone sort of movies that kind of pushed me in a direction of technology, pushed me in a direction of wanting to invent or make things or create stuff. And I did. I went on to doing computing, which I went to doing game design, creating worlds, creating stories, creating characters, level design, stuff like that. So in a way that I did go off into inventing, I became, a designer, creator of worlds. So in a way, I was pushed in a sort of in a creative direction, just not the way I thought I was going to be when I was younger. That I was going to be the next like Da Vinci. But it's neither here nor there. I tried to invent things, but it's one of those. But yeah, so that's where my love of this movie comes from, and that's my memories of it. Where how much time we got? Oh, we've done about 15 minutes so far. That's all right because I do a break, but I'm all right. So actually, tell what, I will have a quick sort of sip of my drink as well. You can listen to me drink. Oh wow, here we are. So next part. For anybody who hasn't played Meet the Robinson sort of game, is a quick synopsis of the game. So we have, here we go, plot. So Lewis is an aspiring 12-year-old inventor who grew up in an orphanage. His energy and eccentricity have been scouring off potential parents, so he works all night on a machine to scan his memory to locate his birth mother, who abandoned him at the orphanage when he was a baby. While taking the scanner to his school science fair, Lewis meets 13-year-old Wilbur Robinson, a mysterious boy claiming to be a time cop from the future. Wilbur needs to recover a time machine that a man wearing a bowler hat has stolen. Lewis tries to demonstrate the scanner, but it has been sabotaged by the bowler hat guy and falls apart. Throwing the science fair into chaos, Lewis leaves while the bowler hat guy, with the help of his robotic bowler hat named Doris, steals the scanner. So that's a basic sort of plot of the story. It was adapted, it was loosely based on the 1990 children's book A Day with Wilbur Robinson by William Joyce. So it's loosely adopted from that. I do actually want to read that book because it seems quite interesting. And as quite a big fan of reading in general, but also of the film and this game, I think it'd be quite fun to jump into that one day. Like it's from 1990, so it's not that long ago. It's a children's picture book, slightly expanded for a 2006 reissue. But yeah, so that's the simple basis sort of tutorial of introduction of the world and of the game sort of thing. The game was published by Disney Interactive. I'm not going to get into it because Disney Interactive, like the type of games that they've made loads. They've made absolutely tons. They were shut down. They were discontinued on May the 10th, 2016, as a result of its Disney Infinite series. Yeah, Disney Infinite didn't do very well at all. But underneath their banner, this is when Disney did a lot of games from like 1988 to all the way to 2016. So they ran for a very, very long time before obviously Disney Infinite basically shut them down. Because again, that series was absolutely terrible. As for the people that made this game, you might recognize the name Avalanche Software. Avalanche Software was founded by 4 programmers formerly of Sculpture Software. It is an American video game developer in Salt Lake City. It comes under a subsidiary of Warner Bros. Interactive now. It was funded in 1995 by 4 programmers. Blah blah blah. blah. I usually tend to go into lots of detail with this, but I'm going to skim over a lot of it because they're a big company that we all know of. Avalanche Studios, they've made a lot of games. They did Mortal Kombat 3. They've done stuff like, let's have a look. They did Rugrats in Paris, the movie. They did the game of that, which I didn't even know there was a game of that. I love that film. Tak and the Power of Juju. Anybody remember that one? I remember the TV show Tak. They did Tak 2, The Stafford Dreams. Tak, the Great Juju Challenge. I used to love that TV show. In 2005, they released the Chicken Little game, which I'm hoping to get around to playing and reviewing. It is backwards compatible on the Xbox One, so I might buy that and give it a play. They also did Chicken Little 2, Ace in Action, which was like the original planned prequel for the original Chicken Little game. Original Chicken Little sort of films, but they ended up didn't making the Chicken Little sequel. They used the story for the game. They did Meet the Robinsons 2007. Also did the Hannah Montana game. They did Bolt from 2008, which I've played Bolt from 2008. It's a fantastic game. It's a bit repetitive. It's a bit button mashy, but it's pretty good. Then they took a year off, and then 2010, which was Toy Story 3. Toy Story 3, the game, not just the film, but the game's amazing. Like anybody who's anybody will tell you that this is one of the best movie tie-in games ever. Mainly because of the sandbox feature that they threw in didn't need to add in a sandbox, or they called it the toy box feature, but they added it anyway, and it was just a fantastic feature that I feel like whenever developers add sort of extra features, kind of like what Bungie did with Forge. Bungie didn't need to add Forge in. No one was asking for Forge or Theatre or anything like this, but they added it anyway because they knew fans would enjoy it. You know what I mean? It's not a gimmick or anything like that. It's generally like, this is something that we thought you'd like. Here you go. And again, Toy Story 3 was the same thing. We gave you the campaign of the movie. We could have stopped there, and we could have done what most games at this time did, of just like tacked on sort of multiplayer and mini games, that sort of thing. But instead, they did a whole sort of sandbox, or they called it the toy box, and you can make your own sort of little town, and you can fill it with little creatures, and you can go on little missions and unlock more sort of costumes, stuff like that. It was incredibly amazing. I had so much hours playing. Even now, I'd happily go back and play it now. As 24 years old, I'd happily put my Xbox on. Again, it's backwards compatible. I'd happily put it into my Xbox, go back and play Toy Story 3. Absolute joy. The Toy Story 2, which again, I haven't played Toy Story 2, but I know it's a racing game. I've heard it's really, really good. I played the first, not Toy Story 2, sorry. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. Cars 2, 2011. I've played Cars 1 on the original Xbox. That was like a sandboxy sort of open world racing game. Very, very confusing. It wasn't very well made, to be honest, but I enjoyed it for what it was when I was younger. I haven't played Cars 2 yet. That's backwards compatible, so I'm hoping to do that soon. Then they did all the Disney Infinity 2.0, 3.0. They did Cars 3 Driven to Win, which is another one that I'm hoping to buy. That's on the Xbox One, mainly to play, to review, and to kind of rate it on the scale of Mario Kart. So that should be a fun one to look into. And they're currently working on Hogwarts Legacy, which that's another one I'm looking forward to. So that's to give you a brief sort of idea of who Avalanche Studios are, and what sort of things that they do, and you know how it works by now if you've listened to this show. I do feel like this episode's me just being really, really happy and excited and rambling. If it is, I do apologise. If I've lost you already, then well, you're probably not here. But I really, really enjoy doing this series. I do. It's not as structured because I feel like doing something different. I feel like being a bit more loosey goosey with it, not sort of more stringent of like I do this and I do that, I do this. And a bit more loosey goosey, a bit more fun. So I want to take a quick break now before I jump into the actual game review. I know, talking for 23 minutes, I'm only just getting onto the review, but story time came first, and I'm very, very excited. And you know what I'm like, I tend to waffle. So I'm gonna take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're gonna review the game. So I'll see you in a minute. Right, so the review, we're on to the more important things, the things that you came to listen to, the whole point of this episode. So before I begin, I just want to say thank you to Felix at I Don't Have a Nose. I've talked about him before. I think I spoke about him when I did my Wally movie tie-in sort of game review. He inspired me to do Wally, and I watched one of his videos where he played Meet the Robinsons on the PlayStation 2, and I just wanted to give him a shout out saying thank you for the inspiration to play it on next gen. If anybody's wondering, and if Felix, if you're listening, because hopefully you are, because I've most likely sent you a link to this episode after I'm finished with it. But if anybody's wondering, the sort of difference between the PlayStation 2 edition and the Xbox One, Xbox 360 version, even though I played it on the Xbox One, the difference between the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 2 version, nothing really. The games are exactly the same. From what I've seen from Felix's episode, I Don't Have a Nose, and from playing it myself, the comparisons are the same. The only difference is the frame rates. I think it's a bit more sharper and clearer, more HD because it's on a next gen sort of console. Obviously, I'm running it on my Xbox One as well, so it looks a bit better, a bit more sharper, a higher frame rate. But apart from that, they're exactly the same. They play out the same, because usually what you used to find with movie tie-in games was the fact of, say, one company would do one version of the game, then another company would do the other version of the game, and that would mean that you'd have the same story but told differently. So I mentioned it in my Wall-E 2 game review, that the Xbox 360 version, because it was made by I think it was made by Heavy Iron Studios, their version was a lot different and a lot more sort of difficult, in terms of actually level player difficulty. It was a hard game. It had ramped up really, really quickly. I won't get into it, but it ramped up difficulty incredibly quickly for no reason whatsoever. But that game was more sort of serious, whereas the PlayStation 2 version was more fun. Oddly enough, even though the game had a lower sort of GPU and sort of quality, the console that it was running on had less power than the Xbox 360. It had more. It seemed to have more features and seemed to do more and be more fun and interesting than the version I played, which you'd think it'd be the way around. So yeah, you do get that. You do see that sometimes with movie tie-in games, that other companies will basically be given the license at the same time. Like, for example, the version of Wall-E or the version of Meet the Robinsons on the Game Boy Advance is completely different to what you'd get elsewhere, which it was for, like, the Incredibles, for example. The Incredibles that I played on the Xbox original was a lot different to the Incredibles that you got if you played it on the Game Boy Advance. It was a side-scroller beat 'em up on the Game Boy Advance. Fantastic game, highly recommend it. But again, it was different. And again, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to thank you for I Don't Have a Nose, and to let everybody know to go check him out. He's on YouTube as I Don't Have a Nose. Check out his videos; they're amazing. Hopefully, they give you some inspiration of older games that you should check out, because some are good, some are bad. But that's kind of the fun part about it, is you just jump in and give it a go and see what happens. But if worst comes to worst, at least you can they're easy achievements. You can use some of the easy that is if you're playing on sort of PlayStation 3, Xbox X, Xbox 360, then you get achievements. Otherwise, it's just playing them for the nostalgia sake of them. So that's my thank you part. On to the next fun part about the actual review. As I like to do always whenever I review a game, I always like to talk about the cover, about the box art. So on the front of the box, it's exactly the same. If you've got the DVD of Meet the Robinsons, it's exactly the same. It's no different. On the front, it says Walt Disney Pictures presents Meet the Robinsons. You've got the whole of the Robinson family, including Stanley, the little guy who had the volcano. He's there. Is it Lizzie, the creepy, weird sort of Wednesday Adams looking weird lady with her what they're called, fire ants. She's on the cover. Funnily enough, which I find is interesting, right? And I'll mention this in the review. Actually, it's mentioned on the box art, but I'll mention this review. The I can't remember his name, because it's the fact that the Robinson family is huge. But we have the weird guy who has a relationship with a woman who's a puppet, and apparently has kids with her. We won't talk about it. But he's not in this game. The dog with glasses, who only shows up for like a couple of seconds in the TV show, in the movie, shall I say? Again, he's only there he's not in this game either, which would be fun to put him in the background, but he's not in there. So we've got that on the front. Wilbur takes sort of present at the front, because again, he is the character that you play as in the game. So I flip it over to the back. It says, save the Robinson time machine, play as Wilbur on over 40 new missions beyond the movie, activate cool gadgets to battle villains, challenge opponents in the action-packed charge ball minigame, post scores and view achievements on Xbox Live. It made me laugh. And then you've on the right-hand side, because that was on the left, on the right-hand side you have little screenshots from the game. And then in little sort of tiny little letters on the right hand side, it goes, not all characters appear in game. and that made me laugh. I'm like, I don't know why they need to mention that, why it's that important. Because most people who are going to get this are kids at the end of the day. Kids ain't going to care if not all the characters are in it. All they care about is I get to play the game of the movie that I just watched. You know what I mean? Um, and yeah, at the bottom we have bowler hat guy, who's hardly in this actually, but you do see him, and at the end you do fight Doris at the end. Where apart from that, it's hardly there. Um, so that's the outer cover. On the inside, I don't have the manual, sadly. The edition, to much the edition I've got is actually very water damaged. That I got from CX here in the UK. I think it was about £2 to £3 I got it for. It wasn't a lot of money. I think I got Fuse at the same time as I got it. I asked them for the um, manual on the inside. They didn't have it. Sometimes they usually don't keep them with them. Sometimes they keep them in the back. Sadly, this time they didn't have it. On the front cover of the disc, we just have Wilbur on his own, and it says "Meet the Robinsons." So that's a box art. Sadly, I can't get all nostalgic and will be happy about the the manual on the inside. It's not box and complete. The game's there. Game's in good quality. Apart from the box being a bit water damaged, overall it's not a bad sort of copy of the game. So there's that. On to the plot. So the plot of the game follows Wilbur. You play as Wilbur. The game starts you in ancient Egypt, and the idea is that Wilbur has a school project where he has to write his sort of, it's kind of like a dissertation sort of paper on different sort of icons throughout history. So what does he do? As being a 13-year-old boy who has access to a time machine, uses the time machine to go back in time and to take selfies with poignant characters from the past. And when we join Wilbur in the story, he's in ancient Egypt and he's getting a picture with Tutankhamun's um, sort of chamber, sort of burial. And the game basically starts, it's kind of tutorial level where it teaches you how to run, how to climb, and how to shimmy among sort of ledges. And it's like a good introduction between the whole idea of time machine and time travel and how it all works. And then after that, we're in the Robinson home, and you're free to explore the Robinson home. The Robinson home's pretty cool. Again, I was getting rather nostalgic as I was playing through the game of being able to go to these different areas. But that's basically the plot. Wilbur's get a science fair project. He steals the time machine, brings the time machine back. Then as he brings it back, his mum tells him you've got to take out the trash. He goes to take out the trash, and if you see in the movie, you basically know where it's going from here. He leaves the garage door open. The ball hat guy comes in, steals the time machine, flies off. Then the game basically follows Wilbur basically trying to chase the ball hat guy, get to the science fair. But during all that, there are other things. So he gets to science fair. He goes to kind of stop the ball hat guy, accidentally tripping over Stanley, who has the volcano, and Lizzie's aunts, getting in their way, pushing them over, not realizing anything of, oh, I'm sorry, thinks he saves the day, goes back to his time to find that he's changed the timeline, that Stanley is now the ruler of the planet, and he's got a huge volcano that's about to explode in the middle of the city. At the same time, Stanley's gone to war with Lizzie. Lizzie has a giant army of robot ants. And then you've got to sort of deal with that problem. And it's a very sort of fun, sort of interesting, wacky sort of story. It takes some sort of aspects of the movie, but then goes forwards onto doing something else. This is kind of what happens during this. So we see Wilbur here. We see Wilbur actually bumping into his mother and helping her, which he doesn't know it's his mother, but helping his mother clean up the frogs and him tripping over Stanley. We see that in the background, but we never sort of get to experience as of what happens, what's the aftermath of it. And this kind of game, it's like a mainstream prequel. Like it happens during the events of the movie, but it's also a prequel sequel sort of thing of what happens elsewhere, like during the same time. I'm not sure if there's a name for it. It's just like an Elseworld sort of story. So that's the plot. As for the gameplay is very much simplistic. It's a lot of running and climbing, a lot of platforming, simple sort of puzzles, that sort of thing. The levels are what sort of sell it for me. the levels and the gadgets. As I mentioned, you get to explore the Robinson house, you get to explore the city for a bit. There are also moments where you get to go into the past and you get to explore Lewis's high school and run around there while you're trying to hunt down the bowler hat guy. There's aspects of time travel. You get to go again back in time to the ancient Egypt. All the levels are really well done. All of them are highly detailed for the 360 era. All of them look fantastic. Again, it just feels like I'm it feels like Meet the Robinsons. It feels like a Disney sort of game. You know, it has that feel like Wall-E did. One of the great things that Wall-E did was that it felt like you had just watched. You are playing the movie. It felt like a carbon copy of what you've seen on screen, and it was just fantastically done. It kind of reminded me a bit of the characters, even though I know it's kind of Disney. The character models reminded me how they looked back in 2005 in the Incredibles game that was made by Heavy Iron Studios. The character models there look a lot of kind of the same as what they do in this game. So there were moments where I was like, I know they weren't made by the same studio, but it's kind of those moments of like, was there sort of like, oh, we've got models from this game from years ago, you can take them and high res them or something like that. I don't know. Nowhere is it written down that that actually happened, but it's just one of those sort of things of like, oh, that seems similar. But the levels are just really great and highly detailed. One level that I will mention, which you do spend most of your time in, which is I see as your tutorial sort of level. The reason why it takes so long, and even I don't have a nose. Felix himself in his review mentioned that this level, out of all the levels, seemed the longest, and I think the reason as to why is that basically when the time machine gets stolen by the bowler hat guy, you then have to go and get the other time machine, and you have to then go through your dad's lab. And to go through your dad's lab, you have to then have to find out the code for the door. So then that leads you off and meet all the members, all the different family members, you know, Grandpa Joe, Art, the pizza delivery guy, Wilbur's uncle, the guy that looked like spicy Italian sausage and cannons, his mother, the lady who likes trains, somewhat, I'm trying to think who else. I think that's more of it. You do get the weird people, the people that live in plant pots. They're around for some reason. All they do is scream at you every time you walk past them. Again, I don't understand as to why. They just do. You also you meet the frogs. They sing. Trying to think who else you see. You see Lampy, the squid butler. He's there. Well, technically he's there. You see his tentacles. You've also got, I think, cousin Laszlo, the guy that likes to paint things. He shows up as well. He sort of talks to you because you get this thing called a scanner, which you can scan things in the level to learn more about it and learn about enemy weaknesses and stuff like that. And every time you scan a certain amount of sort of things, he will come up and say, "Oh, you've unlocked a new blueprint that you can use, and you can use that to upgrade your health or your energy, or to make your sort of gadgets better." They're not called weapons; they're called gadgets. Even though you do use them in a weapon fashion, they're called gadgets. But this tutorial level, once you've gone through all the rigmarole of finding the code, you go down to your dad's lab, and from there you get given your charge ball, you get given your dissembler, and you kind of fight your first sort of enemies, your first sort of enemies is the right word, sort of robot security, and you kind of learn how to do it. And you learn the basics of the game, how it works, and simple puzzles and stuff like that. And even though it's long-winded, it's one of those. It's. I feel like it's needed to kind of really integrate you to kind of show you how the game works. I will admit though that even though that I agree it's long-winded and I agree that it should be long, it shouldn't be as long as it is. It does drag on a bit longer than it should do. It should end a lot earlier than it should do because this is when you meet your first boss level. And the bosses in this game aren't hard. The bosses in this game are quite simple. They all have a simple three-stage structure. Like for the first boss, for example, you fight this huge sort of robot, and you have to defeat him 3 times. And it's quite simple, but it gets quite tedious. You have 3 cannons in front of you, 3 buttons. Each one of them is a color. So you've got to go to the left. You've got to hit the blue button. You've got to go over to the right, hit the blue button on the right side. That unlocks the blue cannon, and then you fire your charge shot through that, which then hits the robot with a more powerful shot that knocks him back. And you do that 3 times, and then you defeat him. And that's the same with all the enemies really. When you meet, I think his name is, I think Prometheus. He called him. It's like a giant lava monster. This boss was incredibly tedious, but you had to dodge all of his attacks because he hits you once. You had to restart it. It was very unfair. So you have to hide until he starts spitting lava at you, and hopefully he hits the chains. You have to stand next to the chains but not get hit, right? So it's very sort of difficult. I died a couple of times doing this, and then he melts 3 chains, and then when once he melts all these chains, and a giant rock that's sort of ironically placed above the monster falls down, knocks the monster out, defeats him. And a lot of these bosses are like this. When you fight Doris or when you fight the Lizzie, the Ant Queen, a lot of these bosses are all 3 act sort of structures. They just get tedious. But again, this introduction level sort of shows you how to play the game. And again, like I mentioned, you go into the city. You go into, especially when it's run over by ants and you got lava everywhere. Very well done. When you go into the Ant Queens, the hive is well done. When you get to see when you go to the future, like a newer sort of future where Doris is taken over and you have to defeat Mecha Doris. Which is funny to say, Mecha Doris, isn't it? It's very futuristic, very grungy, very sort of horrible, very Fallouty sort of looking. So the level design is amazing. As I mentioned, the gadgets as well. You get the disassembler where you can dismantle certain objects so that you can get scrap, and you can use that scrap to upgrade your gadgets. You know, you get your charge cannon, which is like a glove you wear, and you can throw charge balls at enemies and it knock them out and destroy them. You've got your levitation glove, which you can levitate things. You've got your camera, you've got your scanner, you've got your sort of havoc mining gloves, where you can mine underneath enemies and underneath barriers, so you can get to secret areas and you can knock them back and use a charge ball on them. Very sort of like interesting sort of gadgets, and you can upgrade them very much sort of it's within the confines of the world. Like, you don't just get given a gun for no reason. It's still very Disney-fied. Like, they give you weapons, but they're weapons that are like the glove that Wilbur uses to defeat the robots are all toys. You know, it's like it's a toy, but it's done in such a way where it is a weapon. It is a powerful, dangerous weapon. um so, that's the levels, that's the gameplay. It's very simplistic. It's, again, very puzzly sort of game, but it's not overly difficult. It just gets teed as you get through the game, as you would imagine. And I mentioned this before whenever other times I spoke about movie tie-in games. But what you'll find with these sort of games is that they start off really easy, really simple to get you into the world and to get you to learn the basics and how the world is structured and how to play the game and the different buttons and how they work. And they'll slowly sort of, every time they introduce a new weapon to you or a new sort of gadget, they will then spend a level or two teaching you how to use said gadget specifically, so that you know what you're doing very sort of productively. And then they slowly start to ramp up the difficulty the more you know what you're doing. Unless you're playing Wally and out of nowhere they hit you like a freight train, and they just throw you in the deep end and be like, go on, play the game. You know you're going to rage quit. This game's too hard for you, but you bought it now. We've got your money, so screw you. You know. Luckily, this game's not one of those sort of moments. This game doesn't get overly hard or difficult. This game actually has a difficulty setting, so you can choose how difficult you want the game to be. But even if I've played on the easiest mode and I played on the harder mode. The game's not overly challenging. It's like I said, it's very simplistic. Once you know what you're doing, it's not overly hard. It just gets a bit unfair when you get swarmed by loads of enemies that have more health, and the levels are not always big enough for you to be able to move out the way. And sometimes how the button mapping is and how to dodge enemies can get a bit sort of confusing. You might forget to dodge or try to dodge, but you don't press the right button and you end up attacking instead of dodging. I'm making it sound like Dark Souls. It's not, but I mean, it's just to understand. It's one of those sort of thing where it gets quite tedious as you go to the latter levels of the game. Also, another thing that they added in, like another small thing they added in, which again they didn't need to, but I guess it was more so padding and also add on an online feature. Is they added in a mini game, 2 mini games. First was a mining sort of trial sort of challenge. When you get your mining gloves in the levels, there'll be these little hidden discs that you can sort of dig into, and they're little mining sort of levels where you've got to dig through and you've got to dodge enemies and you've got to dodge boulders falling on you. They're quite tedious. I didn't enjoy them at all. I only ever did them if the story needed me to do them. Otherwise, I didn't do them. Um, there were like these really really fun ones where you kind of reminded me again of the Incredibles game where when you played as Violet, you was in your little purple sphere and you had to roll through the levels and you had to dodge enemies. It kind of reminded me of that. You had that sort of like ball sort of levels. I can't remember what it was called, but there's these little sort of ball sort of levels where you had to use against the clock. Luckily, if the clock ran out, you weren't sort of penalised for it. It was kind of just like a challenge sort of thing. But you was against the clock and you had to get from one end of the level to the next. And when you first do it, it's quite fun. It's quite easy. You're in Wilbur's garden. You're protected on all sides, so you can't go off the track. It's very fun, very interesting. You get boosts. Again, very simple. The second time you do it, right, you don't get no walls, no protection. If you go off the edge, which you will do multiple times when you're in the lava area, um, the game's very sort of unfairly be like, oh, we'll just send you all the way to the beginning again. You've got even though you've done all that progress, you got almost to the end. We'll just send you to the beginning again because we're arseholes, right? So there's that. Then like the last time you ever do it, you're in a sewer because there's always a sewer level in any sort of these classic video games. I don't know what it is. It's like a bingo. I have my little bingo card that I just know there's always going to be a sewer level for some unknown reason. One will appear in these sort of games. It always is. 9 times out of 10. I don't know why. So there is a sewer level, and you're in the ball, and it's really unforgiving. You know, if you fall into the lava, if you fall off into the or into sewage, shall we say, you have to start all over again. And I'm so glad, even though you're against the clock, you're not against the clock, if you know what I mean. Like if you don't get to the end in time, the game doesn't penalise you and you fail. Like, I'm glad that feature is not a proper feature because otherwise I would have probably rage quit many times at that last time I had to use that sort of mini game. But you know, it's no robots minigame. I'd rather do the ball racing transport thing in robots than do do it in this game because this one was just unfair. Even though robots, the one in the robots game was unfair, it was more fair than what it is here. And if you played the robots game, you'll know what I mean, because that game wasn't as fair in that transport level as this one was. But you know, this online sort of feature, you can sort of use it. You can play it whenever you want. It's not just part of the game. You can challenge other members of your family to play, and if you beat them, which it's not very hard to beat, the charge ball sort of game. It's kind of like if you ever had like a BlackBerry back in the day phone, or if you've had an iPhone and you had I think on the BlackBerry it was called um, brick ball or something like that. Basically, the idea was that you had loads of bricks and you have a ball, and you have to throw your ball to take out your enemy's bricks. That's basically what it is. So you've got the enemy on the one side, you've got you on the other, and you've got to throw the balls, and they've got to hit their defenses. And once you've hit all their defenses down, you then hit their goal and you score. And it's 2 points. If you get 2 points, you win. So that's basically the game, and the AI on it is quite good, to be honest. Sometimes a bit unfair, but not overly terrible. So there were many times where I was throwing the ball and like the AI would beat me. So I ended up like what I ended up doing, because there's achievements tagged to beating certain family members. So what I ended up doing was that I played on the easiest on the Pee Wee court, which is the really easy sort of court to play on against the family members. Which, because if you played on the later sort of levels, you need at least 3 to 4 to even 5 scores to win. So what I ended up doing was I played on the easy one, so I only need to score twice. Then I would just spam like the corners. I knew there was a perfect spot that you hit, that every time you hit it, it would hit the targets accurately. So I just hit that target constantly over and over again, bombarded it, and I just won just by button mashing, by technically cheating, not playing the game properly. But I needed them achievements, god damn it. But it was fun to play against grandpa. It was fun to play against other family members and to hear their commentary, because they're voiced by the same people that voiced them in the movie. So it was nice to hear them and talk to them as well. because you can meet them throughout when you're exploring the Wilbur house. You meet them and you get to have little conversations with them. So that's quite fun. And yeah, it looks at look from looking at my notes. That is it. That is the Meet the Robinson game. Um, as I mentioned, it's overall, my overall thoughts. It is a fun game. I do enjoy it. I do enjoy my time with the game. If I had to rate it out of 5, I'd give it 4 stars because it is fun. It is tedious at times, and there are certain levels that are longer than they should be. And there was one point where the game broke on me, where I'm in the ant hive, and that when you're in the ant hive, you have these sort of monoliths that you have to scan for a code to get through security. And I did, I scanned them and I found them all. And even though that I took a picture of them on my phone, so I knew what they looked like, so I couldn't get it wrong when I was putting in the codes for some unknown reason, even though I put them in exactly as they were meant to be in the right order, it wouldn't work. And it kept every time you did it incorrectly, it would buzz you, and you'd lose health. So it just kept killing me. And I almost rage quit. I did. But I was like, no, look, you can't be defeated by the Meet the Robinsons game. You're a hardcore gamer. You played harder games than this. You can't let this little glitch beat you. So sadly, what I ended up having to do, I had to restart the level, had to do it all over again, and this time it worked. I don't know why it didn't work the first time round, but for some unknown reason it did. And as soon as it did work, I saved instantly. I thought, there's no way, just in case this game breaks on me again. This is the only time it ever did it. There was no any other time this game was solid as a rock. This was the only time it ever seemed to fail on me. Um, but what I ended up doing, I saved that just in case it does. Just in case it was this one level, that there was a bug in this one level that they didn't manage to catch and patch out. Because surprisingly, this game again, no glitches, no bugs. This game was very, very, very well ironed out. I had no major sort of issues. That I just wanted to make sure that it didn't happen again, and luckily it didn't, and I was able to play the rest of the game without any issue. Um, but overall, this game was fun. It's very faithful to the material, to the TV, I keep saying TV show. I think mainly because I really do want to Meet the Robinsons TV show. I feel like Meet the Robinsons, especially now with Disney Plus, I think a Meet the Robinsons TV show would be a fantastic idea to explore not just of the future, but to go to do time travel and stuff with Wilbur, because that was one of the fun parts of this game, was the time travel stuff, to spend more time with Wilbur, to see what Wilbur was doing before the events of the movie and during the events of the movie. That it was fun to spend more time with him, spend more time with the family, to get to know the family a bit more. you know so I think that Disney Plus would, they're probably not listening to this, but just in case there's somebody who knows somebody who works at Disney Plus, that a Meet the Robinsons TV show would be good. But this game was faithful to the movie, to the source material. All the characters and models are voiced by the characters from the film. Overall, I quite liked it. I quite enjoyed it. It wasn't as bad as, you know, well, I didn't think this game was going to be bad, but like after playing Wally, it kind of put me on edge of like, oh, these Disney movie tie-in games, they might get overly sort of difficult. Because in all fairness, same people that made this game, Avalanche Studios, they made Bolt, and I've played Bolt on the Xbox One because it's backwards compatible. It was free with Games with Gold at one stage, and I've played Bolt, and that game, as well as being a button masher, it has the same problem that Wally had, was that it starts off incredibly easy, and then for no reason whatsoever, the difficulty ramps up out of nowhere, and you have no control of that. You have no control of the difficulty. You have no control of when it happens or why. It just happens. It hits you in the face like a freight train, and you're just left to be like, oh, just deal with it. Keep playing or don't play. It doesn't matter. You've already spent the money. You know what I mean? So I was on the edge. I was on the fence, and I was kind of worried because again, I knew that these guys had done it before with Bolt. But luckily, it didn't happen here. That you could choose what difficulty you wanted to play the game on, and there was no sort of overly arcing sort of difficulty spike. So overall, a good game. Would I recommend it? Yes, I would recommend it more so if you are a fan of the film. If you have an Xbox One, it's backwards compatible, so you can play it. You have to have an Xbox 360. The game's going for relatively cheap. Again, I managed to pick it up for £3 to £4 from my local sort of CEX, but I've seen it cheaper online. And yeah, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. Sadly, the Xbox Live stage doesn't work. It's only one player, but they did have online sort of leaderboards where you can kind of compete with your friends of who got the best score in charge ball. Sadly, they didn't have an actual sort of two-player work, because it would have been nice to play charge ball with my brother and to kind of see, you know, see if, because as I've mentioned before, he tends to beat me at these sort of online sort of games, mainly because he button mashes. So we'd kind of be interested to see how two people that button mash, um, how how well it goes. But yeah, so that's Meet the Robinsons, the game from Walt Disney Pictures. Very fun and very interesting. 4 out of 5, highly recommend. And yeah, so on to the end now. So let's go to the end, shall we? So here we are at the end. I feel like there might have been a few technical difficulties as I was doing that. Um, I don't know why. I think I managed to unplug my headset as I was um, talking. So if at some point the audio goes a bit weird, where it goes from being quite clear to not clear, it's only for a few seconds. I think I noticed it while I was doing my editing. Um, but I try to clear it up as bit so it's not as long, and I tried to sort of rescue it. But if you do notice it, I do apologize. But this has been a fun one. This has been a real sort of good episode. As I mentioned, I'm always excited for every episode that I do. I always get a bit waffly and tongue-tied whenever I'm really excited about something that I talk about. And this is a movie that I love dearly. It's a movie that means a lot to me, and to actually finally get around to playing the game was quite nice. Like I mentioned, it was got quite tedious at times, but it was fun just to play in this world, and that's kind of the whole point of these games. Really, is to be able to um, control these characters that we love, and to be able to live in their world for a bit. And it's the reason why we watch these movies, because we just get enthralled by what we see. And it was just nice to be able to do it. You don't see the bowler hat guy that much, and you don't see Lewis that much, really. It's mostly centered around Wilbur, but that's okay, because we get those two mainly in the film. So it's nice to play the game and to get something different. um but yeah, as you can tell, I really enjoyed this one. But as always, let me know on Twitter if you've played this game before, or if I've convinced you to go out and play it, or if you're glad that I'm back to being less spooky, more excited, me, the mumbly sort of tongue-tied, stuttering, excited version of myself that I'm not embarrassed about. I'm not ashamed of. Like, this is me. This is who I am. This is the kind of person that you've come to get used to. Yeah, the your good old friendly neighborhood nerdy ginger Luke podcast geezer. Um, that's me. I'm happy, as you can tell. But again, barring that, uh, if you've played this game, or if you're glad that I'm back to form, glad back to formula, that whatever it is, let me know on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod. If you listen to this on Spotify, you can also hear this on Anchor, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcasts. You can also find me on Audible. I also have a YouTube, so follow me at if you go onto YouTube and type in the Nerdstalgic podcast, you'll find my flaming face there. Make sure to subscribe, watch my videos, give me a like, share them with friends, and all that jazz. Also, if you're listening to this on Spotify, don't forget to give me a rating underneath my name on my account. You give a little star. If you click on the stars, you get given a chance to rate from 5 stars to 1 star. 5 star, best thing you've heard in your life. 1 star, Vogon's doing poetry. Whatever you feel like is fair, 1 to 5 stars, please do let me know, because it helps me out greatly. Also, for this episode's secret code of the week. So the secret code for this episode is niblets. That is niblets, as in niblets. So if you get onto Twitter and tweet me niblets, then I will know that you've listened to this episode all the way to the end. It's a little secret thing that I do with my very sort of special listeners, those listeners that are hardcore, that listen all the way to the end, you know who you are because you're here, you're listening to it. So if you hear this message, don't forget to send the secret message in to me at nerdstalgic_pod, and that way I know that you know that we know that you stay till the end. You know what I mean. And also, I just want to say thank you to World of Books for sponsoring this episode and for sponsoring the show. Again, don't forget to use the promo code Nerdy10 at checkout to get 10% off your purchase. And that is it. That is all she wrote. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I've got a couple of interesting things to talk about for this November. Hoping to do a few more video gamey sort of episodes this month because the end of September and pretty much mostly all, barring one episode of October, all of Halloween, were all movie reviews. So I will try to get some graphic novel reviews and maybe some book reviews and maybe some game reviews out for this month, November. So I'll try my best to see what I can do, and hopefully you like whatever I do. So stay tuned. Thank you for listening to me, to Luke, to your host, to Waffle. Thank you for listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast. And as always, I appreciate you. You appreciate me. We are a happy family, and with a great big hug and a kiss on me to you, won't you say you love me? Too. Yes, that is a rip off of Barney, but I'm taking it. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.